In the scorching summer of 636, 25,000 warriors stood at the edge of a volcanic wasteland in the Syrian desert, staring across the killing ground at an army nearly 4 times their size. The Byzantine Empire, the most powerful military machine on earth, had come to destroy them. And in just 6 days, those 25,000 men would do something historians still struggle to fully explain. They would rip an empire apart, redraw the map of the entire world, and execute one of the most devastating feats of generalship in the history of human warfare. This is the Battle of Yarmouk, and if you have never heard this story, buckle in, because everything you think you know about how empires fall is about to change. To understand the Battle of Yarmouk, you first have to understand how utterly exhausted the world was in the year 636. For more than 20 years, the two great superpowers of the ancient world, the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Persian Empire, had torn each other apart in a war so total and so brutal that both empires emerged from it bleeding from every wound they had. The Byzantines had fought back from near annihilation, driven deep into Persia, and ultimately prevailed. But the price was staggering. The treasury was empty. The army was demoralized. The rich provinces of Syria and the Levant, the economic engine of the Eastern Empire, had been ravaged by decades of back-and-forth warfare. Emperor Heraclius sat on his throne in Constantinople, victorious and utterly spent. And then, out of the desert to the south, something arrived that no one in Constantinople had prepared for. In just a few years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad in 632, the armies of the Rashidun Caliphate surged north with a speed and ferocity that left the Byzantine military reeling. These were not disorganized raiding parties. These were disciplined, brilliantly led armies of men who believed with absolute conviction that they were carrying out a divine mission. At their head rode one of the most extraordinary military commanders the world had ever seen. His name was Khalid ibn al-Walid. The Arabs called him Saif Allah, the sword of God. The name was not flattering. It was a clinical description. Khalid had never lost a battle. Not once. Not anywhere. He moved cavalry with a speed that seemed physically impossible. He read terrain the way other men read maps. He was a military genius operating at the absolute peak of his powers, and he was about to face the greatest test of his career. Heraclius understood the threat and responded with force. He assembled a massive army drawn from every corner of what remained of the Byzantine military. Professional Byzantine soldiers, Armenian heavy infantry, fierce Ghassanid Arab cavalry, Slavic mercenaries, Frankish warriors. Historians estimate the total Byzantine force at somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 fighting men, dwarfing the Muslim army of 25,000 by a margin that should have made the battle's outcome obvious before it began. The Byzantines marched south into Syria, and Khalid ibn al-Walid chose his ground with terrifying precision. The Yarmouk River cuts through the eastern edge of modern-day Jordan and Syria, carving deep ravines and gorges through the basalt plateau of the Hauran. The terrain is brutal. Volcanic rock, punishing heat, ravines so steep they function as walls. But for Khalid, this was not a problem. It was a weapon. By positioning his army along the plateau above the river gorge, he ensured that the Byzantine numerical advantage could not be used to envelop his flanks. The ravines anchored both ends of his line. The Byzantines would have to come straight at him, and coming straight at Khalid ibn al-Walid, as history had demonstrated time and again, was a fatal mistake. The battle began at dawn on the 15th of August, 636. And what the Byzantine commanders did not yet understand was that Khalid had already won. Not on the first day, not on the second, not even on the fourth, but from the very first moment the battle lines engaged, every single thing that happened was moving, with terrible precision, toward an outcome Khalid had envisioned days before a single sword was drawn. The opening of the battle was overwhelming in its scale. The Byzantine infantry, that vast wall of armored men, some units literally chained together to form an immovable line, advanced across the plateau with the grinding inevitability of a millstone. Tens of thousands of boots on volcanic rock. The clash of armor. The thunder of war drums rolling across the plateau in waves. The Byzantine commanders believed they would simply push the Muslim line back through sheer mass, break it, and let their cavalry pour through the gaps. What they found was something they had not prepared for. Khalid had organized his army not as a rigid line but as a series of interlocking, flexible units that could respond to pressure at any point without the whole collapsing. When the Byzantine advance pushed hard against the Muslim center, the center gave ground deliberately, not breaking, not panicking, but pulling back in controlled retreat, drawing the Byzantine infantry deeper into the plateau, further from their supply lines, further from any shelter. And while the center pulled back, Khalid's cavalry waited. The heat on that plateau in August is not a metaphor. It is a physical force. The black basalt rock absorbs the sun and radiates it back up from the ground in waves. Men in full armor, fighting for hours in that environment, begin to deteriorate in ways that have nothing to do with wounds. They cramp, they lose coordination, their judgment degrades, and the Byzantine commanders, watching their advance stall against Muslim defensive flexibility, began making decisions driven by desperation rather than clear thinking. By the end of the first day, neither side had broken. The Byzantine force had pushed forward. The Muslim line had bent but held. Both armies pulled back to their camps as the sun went down, the air thick with the smell of blood and dust and the metallic tang of iron. The Byzantine commanders, measuring victory in ground taken, believed they had made progress. They had walked directly into the first phase of Khalid's trap. The second day brought renewed pressure. Again, the Byzantine columns ground forward. Again, Khalid's center bent and retreated, forcing the Byzantines further across open ground. But on the flanks, something new began happening. The Ghassanid Arab cavalry, fighting on the Byzantine side, began probing the edges of the Muslim position, looking for gaps. What they found instead was Khalid's cavalry reserve, waiting with the patience of men who had been told exactly what was coming. Every probe the Byzantines made was, from Khalid's perspective, a reconnaissance mission paid for with someone else's blood. On the third day, the Byzantine commanders made their critical mistake. Frustrated by 2 days of inconclusive grinding, they committed a major portion of their cavalry to a flanking assault on the Muslim left wing. It was sensible military logic. Use your numerical advantage in cavalry to find the weak point and exploit it. The Muslim left began to falter under the assault. Units pulled back. There was visible disorder. From the Byzantine command position, it must have looked like the moment they had been waiting for, the beginning of a collapse that would cascade through the entire Muslim line. Instead, Khalid ibn al-Walid appeared. What he did next is the kind of thing that gets passed down through military academies for centuries. Rather than rushing reinforcements to stabilize the crumbling left, the obvious, conventional response, Khalid personally led a cavalry force into the gap the Byzantine attack had created. Not to plug the hole, to exploit it. He drove his horsemen into the space between the Byzantine cavalry that had committed to the flanking assault and the Byzantine infantry still grinding against the Muslim center. He appeared, with terrifying suddenness, in a place where no coherent Muslim force was supposed to be. The Byzantine cavalry, committed to their assault, found a new threat crashing into their flank and rear. The Muslim left, steadied by Khalid's arrival, stopped retreating and turned. What had been a Byzantine flanking attack became, within minutes, a surrounded Byzantine force fighting in every direction at once. The third day ended with the Byzantine cavalry battered, the right flank seriously degraded, and the certainty of imperial victory beginning to crack. But the army had not broken. It was too large, too professional, too deeply invested in its own invincibility. The Byzantine commanders regrouped. They still outnumbered the Muslims substantially. They still believed they could win. The fourth and fifth days were the most brutal. The fighting in the center never truly stopped. The plateau became a place of pure human suffering. Men locked in close combat under a sun that showed no mercy, fighting on ground so hard and uneven that the footing itself became a source of casualties. The wounded could not be easily extracted because the fighting lines left almost no room for the living, let alone the fallen. The smell of blood under the August heat, the sounds of steel on steel, hour after hour, the shouts of men pushing forward and the screams of men going down. Through all of it, Khalid moved. He appeared at every point of crisis along his line with a speed that seemed supernatural to his soldiers. He reinforced exactly where the pressure was greatest. He pulled units back exactly when they had given enough. He launched his cavalry in short, devastating strikes that disrupted Byzantine coordination at exactly the moments when the Byzantines thought they had found a sustainable rhythm of attack. He was managing the entire battle as a living system, and the Byzantine commanders could not find the key to unlock it. By the fifth day, the exhaustion on the Byzantine side had reached a qualitative breaking point. The Muslim army was fighting on ground Khalid had chosen, with shorter supply lines, in a defensive posture that spent energy far more efficiently than the Byzantine offensive. Every day without a decisive breakthrough eroded Byzantine confidence just a little more. An army that size cannot remain in the field indefinitely. The pressure to force a decision was working against the commanders who needed it most. By the morning of the sixth day, the 20th of August, 636, the Byzantine army was still enormous but deeply compromised. Its cavalry had been battered across multiple engagements. Its infantry was physically exhausted. The coordination between its different ethnic components, Byzantine regulars, Armenians, Ghassanid Arabs, Frankish and Slavic mercenaries, had fractured under the pressure of days of inconclusive combat into something fragile and unreliable. Khalid struck. On the sixth day, he did not wait. The entire Muslim line surged forward in a coordinated assault that hit the Byzantine formation simultaneously at multiple points. The center drove hard into the Byzantine infantry. The cavalry swept wide around both flanks, pressing the Byzantine force inward. And then, with timing that seems almost impossibly precise, the Muslim cavalry reached the ravines of the Yarmouk behind the Byzantine rear. The trap that Khalid had been building for 6 days closed. The Byzantine army, compressed from 3 sides with the ravines of the Yarmouk at their backs, began to break. Not all at once, not cleanly. The professional Byzantine infantry fought hard. To their eternal credit, they did not simply collapse at the first sign of encirclement. But units began fragmenting. The cohesion that separates an army from a mob started unraveling. Men who had held their formation through 5 days of grinding combat began, in the face of encirclement and no visible path to safety, to choose survival over victory. The retreat became a rout. The rout became a catastrophe. The Byzantine army ran toward the ravines of the Yarmouk and found no escape there. They ran in every direction and found the Muslim cavalry waiting. The losses on that 6th day were catastrophic. Tens of thousands killed or captured. The military infrastructure of the Byzantine eastern frontier shattered in a single afternoon. The army that Heraclius had assembled to crush the Muslim challenge simply ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. The sword of God had done what history said could not be done. When the dust settled over the Yarmouk plateau on the 20th of August, 636, the strategic map of the entire Middle East had been rewritten in blood. The Byzantine Empire never seriously challenged Muslim control of Syria again. In the months that followed the Battle of Yarmouk, city after city fell. Damascus, Antioch, Jerusalem, the great Christian holy sites of the Levant passed into Muslim hands with a speed that stunned the civilized world. Emperor Heraclius, retreating north, is said to have looked back one final time from the heights of the Taurus Mountains and spoken his farewell to the land he was leaving behind forever. Whether those words were spoken or not, the reality is historically undeniable. The Levant was gone. The eastern provinces were gone. The economic foundation that had sustained Byzantine power for centuries was gone. The Battle of Yarmouk is considered one of the most decisive battles in the history of human civilization. A genuine turning point that opened the door to the rapid expansion of the Arab Caliphate through the entire Middle East, across North Africa, into Persia, through Central Asia, and eventually into the Iberian Peninsula. The religious, cultural, and political landscape that those 6 days in 636 created is still visible in the map of the modern world today. 25,000 men, 6 days. A general who had never lost a battle, fighting on ground he had chosen, with a plan already complete before the first sword was drawn. Some battles end wars. The Battle of Yarmouk ended an era, and began another one that we are still living in. If this story gave you chills, if you felt the weight of what those 25,000 men accomplished on that scorched plateau in 636, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for more of the greatest military stories in human history, told the way they deserve to be told. New episodes every week, going deep into the battles, commanders, and decisive moments that change the world forever. And now I want to hear from you in the comments. Here is the question that has haunted historians for 14 centuries. If the Byzantine commanders had simply refused to fight on Khalid's chosen ground, if they had pulled back, waited out the summer heat, and forced the Muslim army to advance across open terrain, could they have changed the outcome? Could the entire map of the Middle East look completely different today? Tell me what you think below. I read every single comment.